Hello and welcome to Wrestling with Real Estate, where we look to chokeslam all your real estate problems. I'm your host, former WWE wrestler and now Cirque du Soleil performer, and of course, multifamily real estate investor, Barri Griffiths. Now today we're joined by Tim Cooley. Hey Tim, how you doing, man?
Good, how's it going? Thanks for having me here, man.
Oh, it's going awesome, man. Going awesome. I'm very happy to have you on the show. I'm very excited to dive into today's conversation. But before we do that, do you want to sort of introduce yourself and give people more of an idea about who you are and what you've been up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my career goes way back. I was in the Marine Corps. I got out, ended up in the athletic training and sports medicine world. Worked with the 49ers, did that for a couple of years. And then I just didn't enjoy it anymore and then shifted down the business path. Started off with an actual rental property. Was doing very good with that. And then I wanted to do something bigger and got more involved with the investment side of things. Started a company, sold it. And then now I'm really helping people raise capital. So it's been kind of in a journey. And then I also make introductions to investors as well. So it's been a fun journey.
Yeah, fascinating. What was it like working with the 49ers? Was it just something you weren't feeling passionate about, or did you just want something more?
Yeah, so it was awesome. I got offered a year-long internship, which doesn't really happen very often. And at the time I was in school. And so you can imagine I had to finish my classes. So I had to turn it down. And then once I graduated, I ended up going to get my master's degree in sports medicine. I just didn't like it. I liked solving problems for people versus just taping ankles. So it wasn't my thing anymore.
Was there a lot of dealing with egos as well, maybe in that field, or was it not?
Actually, I loved being with the 49ers. I mean, you were an elite athlete. Once you get to that level, there are some people, obviously, but the majority of people are super grateful to be there. They realize it's more of a job than it is like something else. And I loved it. I mean, the guys were awesome. It was such a fun team to be involved with.
Yeah. So how did that transition go from then? Because that's two completely worlds, right? Going working for the 49ers and then from there.
Yeah, it wasn't easy, honestly. So things went way backwards. I ended up going from kind of like the top of the world, needed a job because I didn't want to do what I was doing. Ended up at Sam's Club, just doing meat stuff, counting meat in the back. And, just was biding my time, got lucky, got a job in marketing. And then I just kind of started to steamroll on that. The company I worked with did $14 million in sales through our marketing channels. And then I was like, well, I'm making someone else money. Maybe I can make myself money. And so I started a health and wellness company, ended up selling that. I mean, it just kind of but I had to go way backwards to go forward. So.
Yeah. Well, yeah, let's touch on that quickly, if you don't mind. What was your mindset at that time? Because some people might be going through that right now. That's why I wanted to touch on that, right? With everything that's happened with the pandemic, the unemployment is high. Some people may have had to go from, one minute you're working with the 49ers, right? In the NFL, right? It's, a lot of people's dream job, I'm sure. And then now you're at Sam's Club, trying to make things work and trying to sort of figure things out from there. What was your mindset at that time, and how did you transition that mindset into creating something bigger for yourself?
Yeah, I always knew networking was going to be important. And so I never stopped doing that. I didn't even know how important it was at the time. I knew it later. My world got flipped upside down twice. So I had no other option. So I just took a job to get paid. Right. And I think a lot of us, especially entrepreneurs, people trying to do something, the best money is someone else's money. Right. And so whether that means getting paid by someone else or whatever. So I just knew that. So I got a job, and then throughout that, I was just interviewing. So I knew it wasn't my end goal. I wasn't ever being like, well, here I am, it was like, okay, cool. This is just the path to get me to the next thing. Funny story is I interviewed for the next job while working. So I just went into the back and they're like, is now a good time for that? And I'm like, absolutely. Because I knew that job wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. So fortunately it worked out. So
that's cool. I think there's something big that you can take from that, right? I think there's something quite important that you can take for that. Is wherever you are right now, right? Whatever people's situation is that now, if you have an understanding of what you're trying to achieve and where you want to go in life, it's just a transition process, right?
Yeah.
If you understand that, it makes everything easy. Like you said, it wasn't like, oh, okay, I'm Sam's Club now. This is where, and there's nothing wrong, right? Anyone listening who works at Sam's Club, there's nothing wrong with that, right? But I'm sure most of us, aspire for something bigger and better than that. But if you just use that as in your mindset, as this is a transition phase for me to get to something bigger, I think that's really cool, because it's not like this is where I'm stuck here. This is where I am for the rest of my life, because nobody's stuck anywhere, right? We can all use whatever situation we are, we can use that as a transition into the next bigger part of our life and a better future for ourselves.
Well, and I think if you look at it from an opportunity point of view, each one of the people you interact with, even in a Sam's Club, is the opportunity. You don't know who your client is. I mean, Sam's Club's everybody goes there, right? Like, you don't know who you're going to meet tomorrow that could change your life, right? Mine happened to be a friend of mine from church, but it could have easily been my colleague or whoever. And I just knew like this is the opportunity right now to build, to go to the next thing. And so that's how I did it.
That's incredible, man. That's powerful. It's so true, right? It can only take one person to change any of our lives, right? In whatever capacity that is, but that can be it a mentor, be it someone that guides you in another direction to your life is going. Like, it's only one person. It can essentially be one person that changes your life, and it's just when you have that thought process as well, it's fascinating. But fast forward to where you are today. What is your main focus today?
Yeah, so I have really two things that I do. One is I screen all the investment deals for a local group in Utah called the Park City Angels. We have about a little over 50 members, active members, who write checks all the time. So I get to be on the front lines of all the new innovation, all the crazy ideas, all the cool, crazy people. So I get to meet all those people, which is fun. And then my day job is actually taking some of the companies and helping them get other introductions to investors around the country or the world, depending on what they're trying to do.
Right. So essentially, are you investor relations to some extent? Is that the process of dealing with investors and bringing them on board?
Sometimes, yeah. So basically, it's more like coaching them up to learn how to present. So I wrote a book on this. It's called the Pitch Deck Book, how to present the idea really to an investor so they hear you. And then so that's really the difference is I coach you up, get you in front of people. And then the other side, I screen the other people who, I didn't coach up.
Okay. So we can, as real estate investors and people trying to raise money for deals, what does that look like, right? How can we, because it's raising money, be it for real estate, be it for angel investing, be it for whatever you're doing, right? There's carryovers in all of that, right? Essentially the basics of it are very similar, I believe. What are some stuff that you coach people up in?
Yeah. So key things are, so in my world and in your world is problem and solution, right? What's the problem you're solving? And then what's the solution to that? So in the real estate world, a lot of people don't realize that, hey, look, there's disparate property. We're going to fix it or, whatever. And then we're going to sell it to make more money. Right. And although that story is the same everywhere and across any city that you live in, right? The ability to communicate that you are capable of doing it is the differentiator, right? I could pitch to you all day about buying up $100,000 property. Whether you believe me or not is the question, right? And I think that that's where a lot of people, even fundraising on the real estate side of things, struggle.
Right. So it's a communication that you think it's communicating with possible investors.
Yep.
What you're doing, and then do you have any? So going deeper into that, what are some tips and tricks that you may be able to share that people can use?
Yeah. So first of all is traction, right? So your capability or your ability to prove that you have that capability, right? So for example, like, are you renting out a bedroom? Like, I mean, if you're going to go back like super far backwards, like if you're not even renting out to somebody, how do I believe that you can rent out to someone else? Do you have contracts in place, right? So it's like, well, yeah, no, we've been renting. So for example, I rent out 3 of the 4 bedrooms at my house. And, I've got contracts with them. I have an LLC set up. So I have a track record of running a rental property for, 3 years now, right? Like, so if I want to go and do my next property, I can just backdate with all the contracts that I have. So it's like, look, I've already been doing this. I'm just looking for money to buy the next property. So now I've built in my own traction, even though I used my primary residence as the starting point.
Yeah, yeah, very interesting. Yeah, because obviously people like to see that you have experience doing what you're doing, right? Be it real estate, but be it whatever. If you don't have that experience, it's a little tougher. Do you have in real estate, it's a team sport, right? And it's talked about all the time that you can build a team. And what are your opinions on if someone has a team and they don't necessarily have the experience, but their team has the experience? Do you think
Yeah.
is that a tougher pitch, or is that just essentially the same thing?
It's slightly tougher, but it's not as difficult, right? So you're going to bring in somebody who's got 30 years of real estate experience. I know you're going to be leaning on that person, right? I know that, right? And I know you're the one that's trying to do it yourself. But like, you have to have that. Even in the other side of things, if you're raising capital for anything, like you always have advisors or mentors who have been either in your industry before, or they fill in a gap that you don't have. Like, so let's say I'm just going to use something stupid, but like a notary. Well, I'm not a notary, but we have one on our
Yeah.
team, right? Like, I know that that's such a small piece of the whole puzzle, but it's important, right? It's an important piece.
Yeah, for sure. So, and I think another thing that people have trouble with investors is actually meeting the investors, right? Where do you meet investors? People are like, well, do you need to go to a certain place to meet them? Do you need to bring them a certain place? Like, do you have any advice? Do you talk about that? Is that something that you coach people on?
Yeah. So there's a couple of ways of doing it. One is, so every group has a real estate association of some sort, and there's always new ones popping up because everyone thinks they can do it better. But that's one of those things where it's like, get involved in all of them, right? Like if you're trying to meet the people, because the reality is people invest in what they know, right? So there's some older real estate guy who still just wants to make money without doing all the legwork, and they would happily let you do the legwork and make them money, right? So now you just have to find that person, and they're out there looking for people, right? So ski lifts, honestly, are the best way. One of the best things you can do. Yeah, I mean, not pre-COVID, right? Like, because you're trapped with some random person for 20 minutes, and don't sell them, but like it's really easy to start a conversation, get to know somebody, and then hopefully you can grab lunch at some other time.
Yeah, and I think that I've never heard that before. Ski lift, but it's such a great point, right? They can't get run away, right? They're stuck there with you unless they want to jump off. If they jump off, the conversation's gone pretty bad at that point, right? You might want to work on your investor relation skills. But
Right.
where do you think that conversation goes? Is it just simply trying to get to know them and what they're up to and what their interest is? And then also, I think the tricky part for a lot of people is, how do you bring real estate up into the conversation without being, hey, I'm in real estate, you want to invest with me, right? They say that to anyone, they're going to run a mile.
Happens so often, even in the other side. Everybody wants to pitch their investment thing first instead of build a relationship first. And I think that it's one of the hardest things because, we all have our own like motivations and agendas. But the reality is, I mean, it's like, hey, Barry, would you, we had a great conversation. Like, let's grab lunch next Tuesday. And you're like, yeah, dude, that was awesome. Like, see you later. Right? That's the close. There's no selling. There's no sell 30 meetings from now, because they're going to find an interest in you. And again, if you're building a relationship first, then who cares if you get the money, right? Now, what hopefully happens is this is a high wealth individual that you just met. They bring you over and you're now doing dinner parties with their other high wealth individuals. And then at some point you're like, hey, who should I talk to about raising money about this thing? And then maybe they're like, oh, I'll put in, $100,000 or whatever the thing is, and go and talk to all of our other people.
So it's concentrate on the relationship first. Don't even, maybe for the first, I don't know, 4 or 5 meetings even, right? You might not want to even mention what you do. But then where is the balance in that between creating a ton of relationships, which is great, right? But also not spending a year of your life meeting someone 5 times a day.
Sure.
There's got to be a balance there somehow, right?
Yeah, I think you can start off earlier on what you do, but when it comes to asking for money, I think it needs to come from the position of advice first. Hey, look, I'm trying to raise money. Like, I know this is kind of your past. Like, what am I missing? And then once you have that trust, you're not killing the relationship by asking for money. Like, is this something you would invest in? oh yeah, no, yes or no, right? Like, so you're not, again, you're not going 1,000 meetings before asking, but you're building up at that level. And every single person you're mentioning or you're meeting throughout these processes is the opportunity to ask for advice. There's a phrase, it's like, ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money.
Right. Yeah.
And it's so true. It works out more often than not.
Yeah, yeah, that's I like that. I've never heard that before. Um, but with that as well, you mentioned that these people usually need to be high net worth individual. Is that something that you try and again, it's a fine line, right, between like, hey, how are you doing? Trying to get to know them, build that relationship, and like, hey, are you a high net worth individual? It's not something you ask, but it's got to come out during the phase of the conversation, right? Is that something that you have to strategically try and figure out? Or is it just, or do you tell people that, because it's obviously a fine line, right? It's not, you don't want to be that person that's just constantly looking for people that are wealthy and only building relationships with that, right? But again, there's got to be a yin to the yang, I guess, to some extent there.
Totally. I think you just know, right? Either a person plays off really well that they're wealthy, which is fine, or they just are. And you know pretty quickly, like if they're like, well, I live in Park City, my house is in Park City, Utah. Well, the average house price for a house there is like $2 million. So they're not, I mean, they could be house poor, but the odds of that happening are pretty low. Or you go like, oh, well, I was the CEO of some company and I sold it, right? You can start making assumptions about what their bank account looks like without ever being like, are you an institutional investor? Or you could even ask like, hey, do you do any like angel investing on the side or something like, maybe conversation 2 or 3. You're like, I'd love to get there. I'd love to know how you got to that point. And people love talking about themselves. So it's really easy to, again, you see the conversation where you want it to go, but I mean, you're doing it in a very genuine, like, I actually care. Like, I are you an angel investor? Sweet. What are some of the deals you're in? Like, I'm interested in that,
Yeah. I think the best conversations as well come from a place of interest in other people. If you have a genuine interest in other people, right? In whatever capacity, what do you do for a living? Where do you live? How is it there? What's the weather like? Or what do you do for fun? Like, if you have a genuine interest in people, I think that really helps. And people, it really resonates with people.
Are you on TikTok at all?
No, I thought about it, but no. Are you?
Okay. There's a guy on there that goes up to like Ferraris and crazy sports cars. And he's always like, he's like, hey, what do you do for a living?
Yes.
And then he's created these incredible relationships, like truly crazy ones, just on asking that one question. Like, people follow up with them, invite him out and let him like rent Bentleys for free, like, again, it's just because he was actually very interested in what they did. Like, how did you get to a point where you can afford $1 million car?
Yeah,
that's what
that's interesting. I know exactly what you're talking because it's on Instagram as well. I think same guy does the one with he door knocks now. I don't know if you've seen that. He goes to rich houses and door knocks. That's really good as well because it's interesting, right? Because you wonder how people. I wonder when I see someone in a Ferrari. What is that? Is that person a sports star? Is that person a singer? Is that because a Ferrari is not a cheap car, right? And you wonder how they got there because we want to get there to some extent.
Right. Yeah.
Well, let's talk about your pitch deck. So how like obviously you have you've written a book about it. Like what are some things that on a high level we can take away and that people can learn from and take into consideration when trying to put a pitch deck together?
Yeah. So in the real estate world, it's really about financials. You got to understand how to make money, right? And how, if I'm investing you, how am I going to get my money back? And what does that look like, right? Investors, although many of them do it from a point of joy, actually, it's kind of a retirement thing for them. It's still not doing it as a charity case, right? So how do they get their money back? How do they make more money? Like, what's the long-term plan to get there? A lot of people don't do that very well. And then kind of setting that stage, like we talked about before, like if you're talking it from a business point of view, like what problem are you solving? How big is that problem in the world? And then are you the right people to solve it? And does your solution actually solve that problem? A lot of people, especially with where we're at right now in society, they really want to take care of other people. Social good companies are popping up left and right. But if you said, like, we want to take care of hunger and that's why we're doing this real estate play, it's like, well, houses don't really solve, right? Like, there's not a direct, like, it's not actually feeding somebody. But what you can do, and that's a good marketing ploy, is really focus like, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is how we use our money, and we help people. That's really the solution side of things. And I think people a lot of days, or at least now, get that really confused because they think that like, oh, we're helping people. We're helping people. It's like, no, I get that, but like at the end of the day, it's a business. It's gotta, people need houses. There's not that many of them. And so, like for example, Utah had like 2,000 available units last month. Like, so if you were to pitch and say, hey, look, we need to build housing and here's my business plan. I've built houses before. And I'm like, okay, cool. This is the guy, right? Like that makes sense to me. Um, it's a clear problem, clear solution, and you have the capability of doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some of the main mistakes you see people doing when they're putting together something like this?
Yeah. So a lot of times their finances are really wrong. They don't really matter. But when you look at like, if you were to put like just a spreadsheet on the page, which a lot of people do, well, I can read it faster than you think I can. And I'm looking at every line in like a split second. And I'm like, man, B3 makes 0 sense on this chart. You know what I mean? Like you've never bought one property yet. You think you're going to buy 30 next year. Like, okay, right? That's not going to happen. And so that's a lot of times is people just have like these really unrealistic expectations of their ability to acquire customers or acquire the funding that they're looking for.
So, and is that a case of experience, or is that a case of being too optimistic? Is it a case of being unrealistic? What's the fix for that?
I think getting in touch with somebody who's actually done it before, and actually it's way better to be incredibly conservative, and don't use that word. Oh, these are conservative figures.
we always joke about that in real estate. That's one of the most overused phrases right now.
Yeah.
Conservative underwriting. Well, I've yet to meet one person that doesn't underwrite conservative, whether it is or not, right? That's what everyone says. It's such a buzzword.
Yeah, everyone does it. And you're like, I mean, like, for example, if you were just to double numbers every year and it made sense, that makes sense, right? Like, I think you could, let's just using houses. I think I could buy one this year, sell it, buy 2 next year, because now I have money. I can sell those. Or if it's rental property, same thing. I could buy one. Maybe I'm going to buy one for the next 3 years, and then I'm going to go to a 4-plex or something. Like, you could easily just slow roll. If you beat those numbers, great, good for you. If you don't, now you look really dumb.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. Well, and then from the investors side, people investing in it, what are some of their main concerns a lot of times, because I'm sure even though it's, like I said, real estate and what you do is slightly different, their concerns, I'm sure, are quite similar, right?
Yeah. So the big concerns really are hitting up people that are in your industry. Like that's a big one. Like, so for example, if I were to try and sell you a company on pencils, you'd be like, dude, I don't care about pencils. Right. But if I came to you with a presentation on real estate, you'd be like, oh, this is much more interesting because I know more about it. Right. And I know that what you're doing actually addresses an issue that I've seen. So when a person has that knowledge and experience, you get them hyped. Right. The other thing is if you go back to that relationship development point, imagine if I came up to you and I was like, hey man, what would you love to see in the real estate space? And you were like, oh man, you know what I want is this. And you're like, okay. Now I go to a bunch of other people and I hear something similar. Then I put that package together and I'm like, dude, Barry, guess what, man? I was hearing what you were saying. Look, I put this team together of this thing to go out and let's say it's senior care, whatever, right? And you're like, I've always wanted to be in that. I just don't know anyone. And like, I got it all dialed. I got people that have done it before. And then you're like, yeah, dude, here's $100,000. Like, I already knew you would invest in it because you told me.
Yeah.
So that's another way of taking the relationships that you have and then leveraging them to accomplish something that everybody is already wanting to do.
That's brilliant. I love that. It's just like when they say when you're trying to start a business or trying to come up with a product, go to the market and the market will tell you what it wants, right? Well, it's the exact same thing, right? Go to the investors, find out what they want, and then give them that because then you have customers for that product, right? That's brilliant.
Yeah. Really good. And so it's funny because I used to say that people used to ask this question, Tim, how do I get a developer on my team? And I was like, don't pitch them your idea, pitch them their idea.
Yeah.
You'll get a developer on your team it's like, yo, what's your hobby? Oh, basketball. Man, I have this idea for this basketball app. And they're like, I'm in. Like, it's so easy to sell somebody on their idea.
Yeah, for sure. This is really interesting. What like off the top of the head, is there some stuff that I've missed, some stuff I should have asked you, some other stuff that you think that is important that people know?
Yeah, I think a lot of people need to not rely on Google search as much as they do, especially in this kind of world, right? Talk to somebody, like practice presenting. This actually happens way too often is people will put their pitch together in like a vacuum. And then the first time they're presenting it is on D-Day, right? Like they're like, hey, investor, here's my walkthrough. And then like they're stumbling, their slides don't make any sense. There might be a typo, like all those little things that kind of just like kill that trust factor, even if it's someone you know. But they don't go and they don't get that advice. They don't say, hey, look, give me 2 points of advice that I should fix, or do my slides make sense? And I think that just iteration of asking for help is super, super important that most people don't do. Experienced people do it all the time. Inexperienced people who need it the most don't do it at all, which is really weird.
Yeah. What do you think are some of the biggest turnoffs for potential investors when someone is presenting to them?
Yeah, so I always the book talks about this. It's when you walk into the room to pitch, you've already got a yes. They want to put money in it. Like they wouldn't meet you if they didn't want to, right? So everything after that point is you just giving them reasons to say no. So if anything in the slide is so outlandish, like, oh, bro, I'm gonna build a whole city. You're like, get out. Like, no, you're not. Like, I'm gonna buy 50 properties in the same street. No, you're not. Like anything that doesn't feel normal, like normal human being, right? If you do that, great. That's cool. Like, sweet, right? But the reality is, I think a lot of people just do like moonshots. And in doing that, they end up shooting themselves in the foot. They also they present their business way bigger than it is, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So they'll be like, well, this is $100 quadrillion opportunity. And you're like, sure, it is. Okay. Or they overestimate the size of the market. And I think a lot of those combinations of these just extreme, it happens all the time. You're like, is it though? Those kinds of things actually end up shooting people in the foot more often than if you were to actually give conservative numbers and be like, yeah, we plan to have 5 properties by the end of, year 6. I'm like, cool, that makes sense. I actually like this plan. Like there's a high likelihood of that happening,
Yeah. And it seems like as well, it's like a lot of investors, like you said, they want to invest, right? And they don't need 10 million extravagant ways why to invest, right? They're kind of there for a reason, and they have an interest and you've piqued that interest. If you just give them a solid presentation that's realistic and conservative, right? The chances are, I'm sure, pretty high. And that's interesting that you say that as well, that once you're through that door, you have a yes. It's your job to not give them a reason to say no, I guess, right? Just that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing that people don't realize, like, and that's a lot of people will blame investors, like, ask the question, like, well, I just can't find anyone. Well, you're not looking, right? Like, what did you do yesterday to go meet someone? Oh, I was playing, Minecraft. Okay, well, like, so you did nothing. And then they just don't realize like their job is they want to make more money. Everyone talks about passive income, right? You can't get more passive than just giving someone money and them giving you money back. Like they want to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Who doesn't want to do that, right? Who doesn't want to like just do nothing and get a return on your money? That's really cool. Well, awesome. Hey, Tim, man, this has been really interesting, and I appreciate you adapting what you do as well, and to the real estate world, because it's a pitch deck and raising money. Obviously the investment tool is different, but the basics of it are very similar. And I think, anyone who's looking to really invest as a syndicator, as someone who's raising capital, should read your book. I think for sure it brings value to them. But as this show is called Wrestling with Real Estate, I'll get to the point where I ask some wrestling related real estate questions. And the first one is, what would your wrestling name be?
So I would say it would be the Tortuga.
Okay.
Something my family used to call me when I was little. I wasn't that fast, but so we'll
What
go
is
with
it? Tortuga? What is a tortuga? I don't
it's
know.
turtle in Spanish.
Oh, okay, awesome. Tortuga, that's brilliant. Every wrestler has a special move. What is your special move, you think?
I think mine's communication. Having been doing what I've been in this space for 10 years. I can really see not what you're saying, it's between what you're saying, right? Like the move between the moves, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's interesting. As a phrase in wrestling that I learned early on, which was brilliant, it's not the moves that make you a wrestler; it's what you do in between. So essentially, it's saying when you hit a move in a wrestling match, it's cool, but it's how you stand after you hit that move. It's how you look at after that move. It's how you position yourself. That's what makes you a superstar. Because anyone could do the moves,
right?
But it's yeah. So that's interesting.
And I think that's true in raising capital. It's that small conversation you had before asking for money.
Yeah.
Asking for money is the easy part, right?
Right.
I like that.
That's cool. That's cool. What's been the biggest body slam you've taken?
Yeah, getting divorced, honestly. I had everything I was wanted, and and then I got divorced, and it really put me back, set me back almost what I felt was like 10 years. And so, losing money, losing the house that you wanted to, build into like a retirement empire. And then all of a sudden now just going backwards, and then you have to start all over again.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry that happened, man. So was there a moment that you were standing on the top rope, getting ready to jump, but you were too scared? What was it, and how did you overcome it?
Yeah. So for me, I'll just keep it on the real estate side. So I had a property where I had all the rooms. Like I mentioned, I rented all the rooms. It was actually buying the second one. I didn't know how to spin up the company to put the LLC out of my name. Like I didn't know a lot of those like little nuanced things. And I leaned heavily on other people because they'd done it before. And I was like, what paperwork do I need? Do you mind coming over? I'll buy you dinner so that by the end of this, I'm ready to go. And it's been really great, So it was the first one was the hardest.
yeah. But I think that's a great piece of advice, and it's just it translates into whatever you're doing, right? Is ask people that have done it how they do it, right? Because it's very rare that there are some businesses and whatnot, and angel investing, whatever, where people start a brand new business and it's not been done before. But essentially, if we're talking about real estate, it's all been done before, right? Find someone who's done it, who's successful, who's doing what you want to do, and that word value, bring them some kind of value. If it's buying them lunch, if it's doing some work for them that they need done, whatever it is, find what they need and do that for them. And then hopefully in return, they'll give you the information that you need. So, and it really is that easy. And I love that. I think that's so important for so much, because so many of us want to do it ourselves and figure it out ourselves, but you don't need to, right?
Yeah.
Why take 10 steps when you can take one, right?
Well, and the reality is you're going to do it wrong, right? I mean, I've done it. I've been an entrepreneur for years, and everything I wanted to do on my own, if I was brave enough to ask the questions early on, which I would have saved myself so much money, so much time. Instead of going far right, I would have taken one step forward, and I'm much better at asking questions now. It's so much,
Yeah. You don't have to do it alone, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, Tim, man, this has been really, really, really interesting. I really appreciate you taking the time. But before we go, tell people where they can find out more about you. Where can they find out your book? How can they get in touch with you? All that good stuff. Everything you have. Let people know about it, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to follow me on LinkedIn. It's LinkedIn, whatever those words are, and then just Tim L. Cooley. Super easy to find. And then if you want to email me, same thing, timlcooley@gmail.com. Happy to chat about anything. And if you want to find the book, it's on Amazon. Just Google the Pitch Deck book. Super easy to find there as well. But yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. This has been awesome. You're great. This is cool.
Oh, thank you. No, you're awesome, man. And it's been really interesting. So I appreciate taking the time. Well, have an awesome rest of your day. And like I said, I really appreciate it, man.
Absolutely. Thanks.